Thank you very much, Dr. Langsam. As talented athletes in a variety of equine disciplines, thoroughbreds are in demand for second careers as they exit the racetrack. Veterinarian Dr. Jeff Berk of Equine Medical Associates will now present on an easy-to-use, standardized evaluation process to aid trainers, vets, and aftercare facilities in determining which jobs best fit individual horses.
I'd like to thank the Grayson-Jockey Club for inviting me to give this talk, and we'll get started. Today I'm going to speak about a standardized form that can be used by veterinarians to evaluate horses that are coming off the track and entering a second career. Let me figure out how to use this thing. There we go. Okay. As you all know, Thoroughbred Aftercare has become one of the foundational elements of the welfare initiative in the racing industry. It's an especially important part of our ability to maintain what we call the social license to operate for racing. There are many reasons why horses are taken out of the racing population, most commonly due to injury or what I'll call lack of aptitude. That can be a multitude of things. Sometimes it's just being slow. The veterinarian's job is to assess the horse when it leaves the racetrack or when it arrives at the aftercare facility. This assessment can include a physical examination and a lameness exam, accompanied sometimes by diagnostic blocking and imaging. I'm going to show you a short video in just a few minutes, sort of illustrating the process. The point of the assessment is to determine whether the horse is a good candidate for a second athletic career, and if so, what level of athleticism that horse is likely to attain. I'd like to emphasize that this is not an assessment of talent or athleticism. It's really more, better stated, an assessment of what limitations may be imposed on that horse by the clinical findings resulting from some previous injuries. Many aftercare facilities rely on that veterinary assessment as they're presenting these horses to potential adopters. Any recommendations that the vet makes are not an assessment of talent, as I said earlier, but based on physical capacity. Traditionally, each aftercare group has some sort of form to record basic information about the horse. This information has the potential to be extremely valuable to the aftercare organizations if the information is complete and legible. So the first slide I wanted to show you is simply a piece of work that was done by the AAEP Racing Committee. A few years ago, we had several groups working together to designed to address different topics. And one of the topics was thoroughbred aftercare. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, there are 3 people in the room that were involved in this piece of work. Dr. Langsam, that just spoke so nicely about wearable technologies, was actually the chairperson of that group, and Emma Adam and myself. So we were, our subgroup was basically put together to review this document, which originally was put out in 2011, and we revised it in 2022. And the reason I put it up there is nothing more than just to make you aware of it. It's a great resource material. It can be found on the AAEP website, and it's good to have a read through. And what I'm going to introduce to you today, the form, is basically sort of mirrors the information that is in this document. So it's something that you might want to take a look at. It was recognized as we were working together that there'd be value for aftercare if we were able to harvest information about these horses and create a data bank from which we could extract information. As I mentioned earlier, each aftercare organization has some sort of form to record information. The problem is there's no uniformity regarding the history, clinical assessment, or prognosis for future level of athletic activity and probably as important or more importantly, no uniformity of terminology. Because of the lack of uniformity, no meaningful data can be created from the information on all of these forms that are collected from various organizations. To address the need for data collection, the AAP Racing Committee created this standardized form for recording information about horses coming off the track and entering into the next phase of their lives. Basically, this is a 3-page form, and what you'll see, I'll flip to the second and third page in just a minute, but essentially, to avoid what the problem of everybody creating their own language when they fill these forms out, and sometimes the handwriting is illegible. So in order to create something usable, we created check boxes, and you may or may not be able to appreciate all of that writing on there are various, the common areas of pathology where horses would get injured, referable to from the bottom of their leg to the top, from the foot all the way up to the shoulder, and from the foot all the way up to the stifle behind, and then other things as well. You've got not only musculoskeletal issues that could be the injury that the horse retired from, but you've got airway issues, neurologic potentially issues, and basically a variety. The vast majority of the things that would cause a horse to be coming off of the racetrack. And so you say, so why the check boxes? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, as I already mentioned, is the uniform terminology. You know, you might say, somebody might call an injured fetlock degenerative joint disease. Somebody else might call it an oslet, which is kind of an old term. And there might be a multitude of terms for the same thing. So basically what we're trying to do is create a vehicle for getting usable information. There were some, as you see it, it's in the form that it's been in since being board approved by the AAP Board of Directors. Prior to this talk, I did try to get some input from various individuals, and Dr. McElraith out at Colorado State had made a few suggested changes which haven't appeared there, but we can certainly attend to that. So who uses the form? Well, this is page 1, and what you'll see there is that's for the attending veterinarian. That's for the veterinarian at the racetrack when the horse is exiting the track. Most of the time when horses leave the track, there is some sort of form that accompanies it and filled out by a veterinarian. And some of them are very good and others are not so good. Some are legible, some aren't. So what you're going to see here, you've got that page 1. This is page 2, and this is, as you can see, the identical set of check boxes. But in this case, this is for the veterinarian that's receiving the horse at the aftercare facility. So the form could be filled out by the veterinarian where the horse leaves the track, the veterinarian where the horse enters the aftercare facility, or both. And there's some interesting things to think about if both of them fill them out, and I'm going to illustrate that for you in just a few minutes. So that's for the intake veterinarian. And then this is the third part of the form, and this basically mirrors the information that's in the aftercare guidelines, trying to assess what level of usage this horse might have. This is not anything, there's nothing exact about this. This is for lack of a better term, an educated guess, but it's usually based on experience, and it's just a projection of the level that horse might attain. Again, not based on the horse's talent, but any limitations that might be imposed by some pre-existing injuries. So just a little bit of background about this work. I do some work. I'm one of the veterinarians that works for New Vocations here in Lexington. New Vocations is the largest thoroughbred aftercare facility in the United States. They have about 6 They're located in multiple locations in 6 different states, and they, as many as about 85 other organizations, are under the umbrella of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, as you probably know, is the organization that accredits, funds, and provides oversight over these aftercare facilities. So the process consists of, first of all, typically either Anna Ford, who is the director of New Vocations, or her head trainer, Amanda Tucker, will typically provide me with an email the night before, or maybe a couple of days before, with a complete history. And it's very good. It enables me to really, I think, bear down on these horses. They provide the age and sex of the horse, how many starts, the date of the last race, the date of the last workout, the trainer, donor, the date of arrival at New Vocations, any vet reports and images, and their initial assessment, as well as any images that were obtained from previous vet exams. So we might have a series of things, several months apart. So it's quite complete. I'll do my physical examination, paying particular attention to any gait abnormalities or subtle neurologic signs, and I think that's an important point that I want to emphasize in a little bit here. After the exam, I do the appropriate diagnostics, x-rays, ultrasounds, etc., and then I create a brief report, and it's usually just a one-pager with the history, physical exam, imaging results, and interpretation, and recommendations for New Vocations. So this is typically what I will get. I usually print it up and put it on a clipboard. I've eliminated some of the information just to be sensitive about confidentiality. And so that's some information I've got on that horse, plus a link to images. And then this particular horse had a mid-body sesamoid fracture. I think you can see it right there with the actual discharge. And this horse had a screw put through that. And so I'm going to run this video. Standardized form that could be used for collecting information on horses coming off the track and what their suitability might be. This is the form, and I have filled it out for this particular horse. You can see the intake information, reason for retirement was an injury, and then this portion here, all these check boxes are for the attending vet at the racetrack to fill out if this horse is evaluated at the track. May or may not be, it depends on the case. And then ancillary information. So in this case, it has the date that the horse was injured and then had surgery, and then the follow-up, and it describes the surgery: internal fixation of a mid-body sesamoid fracture of the left front medial sesamoid. We have the same exact set of check boxes for the veterinarian, the intake facility. You may actually get a duplication if both veterinarians are filling it out, but at least one veterinarian is able to fill out this information. This would be the boxes that I use here at New Vocations when we're evaluating horses for a second career. You can see we have all kinds of musculoskeletal issues, soft tissue, airway stuff, and neurologic concerns. And so once that's filled out, and you can see what I filled out on this particular horse is basically left front fetlock, medial sesamoid fracture, and then I had comments regarding the fixation. The third page is the date of the examination, further veterinary recommendations or comments. My comments here were sound at the walk and trot, no clinical signs regarding the left front fetlock in the sense that it has a normal range of flexion, does not carry any filling in the joint, no heat, and to all appearances, the fetlock appears normal. As you could see in the images that we took, the radiographic images, the sesamoid is in a healing phase, and it remains to be seen what kind of healing we're going to get. So we're probably going to have to be a little bit guarded as far as the kind of a prognosis that we're giving this horse in terms of any future athletic activity. I mean, clearly, as far as low-level exercise, trail riding, pleasure riding several times a week, I would imagine that this horse would be fine. Lower level competition, probably fine. Once we get into mid and upper level, I think it's questionable, and I think we'll have to follow him along we will re-radiograph this horse in approximately 60 days to see the progression of healing and maybe be able to render a more accurate prognosis for athletic activity at that time. So this is the third page of the form, and you can see I've filled it out accordingly. Considerations as far as the use of this form. I think Chip Johnson was fairly eloquent in his description of his day, his average day, and the hoops that he jumps through. And so one thing we want to do is to try to not create extra work for the attending vet at the racetrack. I think that the idea is that this is supposed to be quick and easy. It would be useful if the attending veterinarian were able to list what they perceived as the horse's career-ending injury. The form could be slightly edited to focus on 2 questions for the attending vet. Which of these, if there were multiple checks there, which of these precipitated the horse's retirement, and something to the effect of, if you have any additional knowledge, that could be helpful. So I guess the question then is, how can this form be helpful potentially for research and safety and welfare? How can this impact these horses positively? I guess I would say a number of years ago, there was a void in the industry regarding the recording of racing injuries, which led to the creation of the Equine Injury Database. And we've identified another void, this time regarding information about racehorses' second careers. There's not a lot of information regarding correlation between racing injuries and second careers. So there's a need for this information. We think this data has got a lot to offer regarding a couple of things. I think one of them is enhancing opportunities for a second career, and then also getting in information, primarily retrospective information about racing careers, which could be useful in enhancing safety measures and medication policies. Aftercare organizations are looking for guidance regarding the potential of each horse for a second career. Over time, this accumulated information could help us make more accurate prognosis for the level of athletic activity any given horse might attain based on the type and the extent of injury. Since we can't predict talent or athleticism in a new discipline, what we're really talking about are the limitations that those injuries might represent. This information could help us in addressing what we call the one more race syndrome, just to help us to understand at what point it's inadvisable to continue race training in order to give the horse its best opportunity for a second athletic career. The information may also be able to help us refine our thoughts on racing medication policies and how they affect a second career. One example might be the use of intra-articular depomedrol in high motion joints. The form could be made available electronically in the form of an app and could be filled in online and sent to a reporting portal for anonymized data collection and analysis. There's great capacity to extract useful information, but only to the extent that horses can be tracked as they enter a new discipline. It may require coordination with USEF, aftercare organizations, Thoroughbred Makeover, and others in order to be able to do that. I had mentioned a couple of things. In looking at the checkboxes, you saw that there were a few things on there that might not have struck you as important, but I think potentially, as we gather data, it might help to either confirm or deny some of the clinical impressions that we have when working with these horses. There's a couple of things that have really stuck out to me personally in doing this work. One of them is with regard to horses' feet. We have, when we're evaluating these horses and jogging them and evaluating them for any gait abnormalities, it's a lot easier to discern a lameness if it's a single leg lameness. Some of these horses just travel very short in front. And it's happened a few times where it's been discouraging, where we'd be working with a horse and it seems to be relatively sound, traveling fairly evenly, and we think, well, maybe that's just the way that horse moves, and then mess around with that horse for a few months, and time is money in the aftercare business. And so you're basically maintaining these horses for several months in the hopes that the horse will progress. And then finally, we've basically x-rayed their feet and found that there's some degree of P3 rotation there, sometimes in both of them. And so that's interesting information that a system like this might be very helpful in confirming in terms of the prevalence of something like that. I think it's clear that there are horses that have a bout of laminitis, some of it resulting in rotation of the coffin bone to some degree that goes undetected. So that's one area that has been cropped up several times that's interesting to me. Another is, I mentioned there's a box for any kind of a neurological issue, and you'd say, so how often do you run into that? Well, it's kind of interesting. Some of the histories of these horses are such that they'll have an injury, they'll rehab from the injury, get another type of injury in a different leg or a different location, and this is the history of this horse injuring itself until finally it reaches the aftercare facility. And when you do a thorough neurological exam, you find that some of these horses have actual subtle neurologic issues. And not only is that a problem from the standpoint of these horses becoming an athlete, it's an obvious problem, and it probably explains some of the injuries that they've had in terms of their ability to know where their proprioceptive ability, but also it becomes a potential liability issue from an insurance standpoint when you're adopting out a horse that actually has a neurologic issue that is then known. So these are the kinds of things that I think we can tease out of the information if we can gather enough information on these forms. I did, as I mentioned, I sent this form out for some commentary to several individuals, and some of them are in the room today. And I'll just there were some interesting points that were brought forward. Dr. Sue Stover's here, and as I'm sure you know, that she is the chair of the HISA Racetrack Safety Committee. And I'm not gonna try to paraphrase her. I'm actually gonna read her comment because I think it's extremely interesting and it pertains to this. She says, if the new owners, in other words, the adopters of these horses, are registered with HISA as the designated owner, responsible person, or as an attending vet for the horse, they will be able to see the HISA medical records for the horse. And I think that's very interesting, and if it, I think we need to look at that carefully and see if that is a possibility, because the more information we have about these horses, I think the more we're going to be able to learn about their ability to enter a second career, and it may even help us in terms of, putting together data for racing. I did reach out to Tim Parkin. He had to catch a plane, so he's not here, but his comment was it would be an excellent resource to summarize the end of racing injury status on transition. And he also said clearly understanding how well the forms are completed will be really important. So essentially, this talk is completely aspirational. We're pointing towards something. The form is nothing more than a vehicle, a means to an end. What we're looking at is trying to get it into wide usage, to get it to be adopted, and for people to take it seriously enough to really provide as much information as possible, and then get industry buy-in to see where we can go with this, because that's probably the hard part, is getting the implementation of the usage of the form, and then getting it figuring out how to collect and use the data. I did talk briefly with Matt Giuliano about this, and because this is not my area, I would have no expertise in this, but the technology to support this system would be similar to the equine injury database and the treatment reporting system. A system to provide data on horses exiting racing and into aftercare may require at least 5,000 hours of development, including full integration into the database of the Jockey Club. The most successful and durable solutions to industry challenges are those met with a collaborative effort among many stakeholders. And it's the same here as well. A collaborative effort among as many of the touch points of the life cycle of a racehorse as possible would go a long way in ensuring the success of finding the best career for retired thoroughbreds. I also did reach out to Kristen Werner, and Kristen, you had some comments, and I was going to ask you to you have a microphone there, or do you want to just come up here? You'd given me several comments, and I wanted you to basically address those, if you would. Do you want to just use this? Those are the two things.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you. So just for a little bit of background, I actually quality control the equine injury database. And so a lot of my comments were kind of related to the data side of things. From an aftercare perspective, I think this information is vital for aftercare organizations to get from the racetrack, as well as adopters to know the history on their horses. But from a data perspective, we don't have any great data on when horses are retired with specific types of injuries, what is their potential for a long-term career? And so when we look at the equine injury database, we only use data that we know is accurate and complete. And so to that end, with this data, we would want to make sure it goes through several layers of quality control as well. We have the ability to backstop it against several items. One would be the HISA retired horses. They do have to be retired out of HISA as a covered horse, and so we can look for a list of those horses to know how many of these reports should we be seeing if we're getting complete information. And then, of course, the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance has inventories from all of their aftercare organizations. Ideally, all of them are going to come with this form. And the other part of it is also completeness. And the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance organizations and other rescues and horse organizations that are not-for-profits do an amazing job of retraining thoroughbreds. But there is a huge market for thoroughbreds as well through private resellers and retrainers. There is not currently a certification or an accreditation process for those type of private resellers, whether it's a business or an individual, and that's probably a topic for another day. But if we could get this form into their hands as well and collect the data for the horses that they are putting through their programs, it would be immensely helpful in completing this data set. They are likely getting a different type of horse in some cases and or getting horses from different locations, whether that's from the farm or from racetracks where there's maybe not as big of an aftercare presence. So I think that the bona fide resellers is an important part of this puzzle as well. And then the only other thing I would add is I would second what Dr. Berk said about the feet. We hear it all the time. Thoroughbreds have bad feet. My thoroughbred has bad feet. Recording that information on this form as well would really help us be able to develop some continuing education, whether that's for farriers or trainers or barn help, to try to improve whether it is a real or a perceived fault of our thoroughbreds that their feet are bad. We certainly would be able to make some changes or at least have facts to support it if we've got that data. So I covered the things?
Yeah,
okay.
Thanks, Kristen, and that's all I have. Thank you very much.